Welcome, everybody. How are you out there, citizens of the world? So this is an interesting episode because we're going live on both Mint Press and on my channel. So to some of you, this is an episode of Moment of Clarity. To others of you, this is a Mint Press live stream. And I'm going to co-host it basically with a good buddy of mine, but also an amazing journalist. And for those who've never heard of me, I'm a comedian named Lee Camp. I just had my show of 8 years, Redacted Tonight, canceled due to U.S. sanctions, and all of the past episodes deleted from YouTube globally. So I'm enjoying the censorship in one of the, I'm now one of the most censored comedians in America, maybe the most censored. It's tough to, I don't know if good fact checkers have gotten together and really analyzed the statistics on that. But so that's who I am. And so co-hosting this with me is a good buddy of mine, but also an amazing journalist. He's made incredible documentaries, other great stuff for Mint Press. And his name is Dan Cohen. Hey, Dan.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How are you, Lee?
Thanks for doing this with me. So there's a reason I should tell people that we're doing this for those who didn't hear. So you've been working with Mint Press and Behind the Headlines for a while now. But I, other than Mint Press sometimes putting up my columns, this is a new venture for me. Basically, they're stepping into the void where I used to have a show on RT America, canceled by U.S. sanctions. And I will be starting a new show with Behind the Headlines and Mint Press in hopefully within a month. And that will happen if the current fundraiser is successful. You can see it scrolling on the bottom of the screen. Details about the fundraiser. It's at Indiegogo.com. We'll be mentioning throughout. But we're going to talk about a lot of other issues than just the fundraiser. And you, meanwhile, have been making and continue to make awesome docs and live streams and everything for Behind the Headlines, correct?
Yeah, I have a number of plates kind of in the air at the moment. A couple of documentaries on Haiti that we put out the trailer some months ago, and we're in the final stages of that of releasing that.
We'll show that trailer in a minute.
Yeah, we'll get into that, and also I have a documentary on Colombia coming out on the peace accord from 2016, and how it has not been properly implemented, you could say, and basically there's been an extermination campaign against the ex-combatants who signed it, as well as social leaders from the countryside and basically poor people. So a lot of projects in the works, in addition to written investigations and live streams. So trying to just do it all. And but it's been good. And I'm really excited, to kind of for Behind the Headlines to take this next step for you to, join the project and add a new dimension to it.
Yeah, and as people would imagine, these things take money. They take several people. It's not just you and me. Minar Adley created Mint Press, and she does amazing work as well. But then there's, editors and camera people and things like that. So in order to do that, we do need people to step up and kind of join the fight with us and be a part of the campaign. And you can do that at bit.ly/BTH campaign, which is scrolling across the bottom of the screen, in case you didn't hear what I said or didn't understand all of the weird letters I said. It's at the bottom of the screen. But yeah, it's an Indiegogo campaign. They're trying to raise $200,000 in the next 2 months. And you get all kinds of perks I noticed over there. You get swag if you sign up, So another good reason. But so let's jump into it. I thought we'd start. We'll get to the some of the trailers you've put out recently, but I thought we'd start off with a new. I mean, I guess it's been going for a while, but a new step in the censorship. This news card bullshit, which I'll show. So this is another friend of ours, Max Blumenthal's tweet about it. The Gray Zone has just been sent a letter basically saying they need to prove themselves to NewsGuard. And I think Mint Press has received the same letter. This is their horseshit letter. I'm a reporter with NewsGuard, a service that reviews news and information websites for credibility and transparency. And then it basically says, please, justify yourself, your ownership, your financing, and explain claims that appear to be false on your website. And then Max wrote back a scathing response saying, the idea that I should have to justify myself to your ridiculous organization that's funded by, that's connected to the national security state and financial oligarchy. So can you give a few details about NewsGuard?
Well, I remember when NewsGuard popped up in like maybe 2017 or 2018. First, actually targeting Mint Press. Mint Press was maybe the first. If it wasn't the first, it was among the first websites targeted by NewsGuard. And basically, NewsGuard is this organization that claims to be, telling you what is safe and good news to consume. What's not gonna bring dangerous thoughts, subversive thoughts into your head. They claim that it's about fact checking. So,
Right.
but they give, I can't remember what grade they give WikiLeaks, for example, but as you can imagine, it's
Oh,
low. And
I heard. I believe this is the same organization that gave WikiLeaks like a failing grade, and their
right.
explanation was that they never retracted anything.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it was. Because they never because they never had to. They never got anything wrong.
They never got anything
So
wrong.
So it's just obviously a tool of the national security state to basically, feed liberals, to basically censor for, concerned liberals who are worried about consuming disinformation. And this kicked off in the Trump era, and this obviously continued into the Biden era. I mean, it operates on this assumption that we need to be told what is safe media to consume, because the public they believe is too dumb to think for itself, to be able to weigh out different opinions and facts and considerations and come to their own conclusions. So instead of you, the public, or us, the public, thinking for ourselves, they're going to do it for you. And it's just obviously it's a complete front for the national security state, and corporations that fund it. And so now, NewsGuard, having targeted Mint Press some years ago and given us a negative grade, is now going after the Gray Zone, among others. You can read. There's actually a really good investigation on Mint Press by Whitney Webb that she wrote when this whole thing kicked off some years ago. So if you just Google Mint Press NewsGuard, you'll find it. But I mean, it's just
Well, maybe not Google. I don't know if they put Mint
oh
Press
yeah,
on Google.
yeah, right. It's probably removed from Google. But I don't even know if there's if there's a search browser. Just go on Mint Press and look on Mint Press's website.
There's a lot of problems with DuckDuckGo. I was actually
Right.
tweeting at the founder the other day. But if apparently on DuckDuckGo, if you type in the source you're looking for, it will still give you that. So if you were to type in Mint Press and something, it will give it to you. But his point is, his argument was, we don't censor results. Look, if you want RT news, just type in RT. And I'm like, motherfucker, that's not how search results work. You're not supposed to have to type in the source you want. Right. You're supposed to type in, hey, what's going on in Ukraine, and get an assortment of sources. And he's basically arguing, yeah, DuckDuckGo gives you CNN. What's wrong with that?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, you're supposed to already know that you should want something. I remember when I had this when the Venezuelan coup kicked off in 2019. I did this investigation with Max, and it was like, it went viral. It blew up. I exposed Guaido. We exposed Guaido as this product of the national security state, which is pretty much everyone understands now. But at that time, it was, who is this guy? And so we showed who he was, and that he was just a regime change operative. And the article blew up and got, reposted here and there in the next place, and it got translated into different languages. And if you Googled it, you could not find the original link. So it was like
Right.
all the other links of it, how it where it got like cross posted were there, but you could not find the original link. So it's obvious, that Google just basically buried it somehow, or used whatever algorithm, so it just could not be found. But they weren't terribly sophisticated, so you could find the other ones. So yeah, I
That
retract my endorsement of Googling for that article.
that also happened on Twitter, or maybe it is still happening right now on Twitter to our friend Wyatt Reed, who, if you type in, you could even type in his like handle and it won't show up. You have to like the only way to get to his Twitter is to like find someone else that tweeted at him and click on that or something. Like it's the craziest level of like shadow banning. But this is what we're facing, on so many levels. And and like I said, all of my old videos are banned on YouTube. Of course, all the times and all the reports you did for RT
Right.
are also deleted from YouTube.
Right. It's
Um,
it's it's crazy to think all that. I mean, you were at RT for years and years, but like, yeah, I mean, every single report that I did there is just disappeared. And so, I mean, I guess I can find them on the RT website, but having to dig through and find them, there's so much stuff that I've even forgotten about now that I think occasionally I'll think back to, and I'm like, wow, I don't have any record of that anymore. They just completely erased memory, and so. I mean, that's what the whole censorship thing is about. It's not only about, preventing you from accessing relevant information now, but also about erasing the past, erasing memory. So as if, these certain things never happened, and when you want to go back and review the record, that none of that is there. So it's really a totalitarian form of control that we're laughing about it and poking fun at it, which is important to do, but it's really serious.
yeah, it's digital book burning. Like it's amazing people don't view it the same as book burning. I like there really is no difference. It just happens that our technology has moved ahead. Um, But so yeah, this is one of the many reasons that we need your support. If you're watching this, please become a member at Indiegogo. You can search if you go to Indiegogo.com. You can do a search for Lee Camp. You can do a search for Dan Cohen, Mint Press, Behind the Headlines. All of those should bring up. I mean, when I tried it, all of those will bring up the Behind the Headlines campaign, or go to the link that's scrolling across the bottom of your page. So, and feel free to throw a comment if you've already joined in the comment thread there. I'll try and highlight it if I notice it. So anybody who's already become part of the campaign, please let us know. And so I want to get to some of your docs and show some of these trailers. Do you want to give a lead up to the this is the one called the Peace Trap?
Yeah. So the Peace Trap is about the formation of the 2016 peace accord in Colombia, which was, this kind of historic agreement that saw was supposed to see peace come out of the agreement, where the FARC, this rebel group that had been fighting the government, this basically narco regime that had grown stronger and
for
stronger since,
for like decades, right?
yeah, since the
Yeah.
60s, since the
Yeah.
early 60s. Basically, the U.S. came in and advised the Colombian government at that point to basically wipe out these communist enclaves. They were just independent enclaves, and so under what was called Plan Lazo, and the government, the U.S. military advising the Colombian government, went in and just bombed the hell out of this enclave called the Marquetalia Republic, and killed a lot of people. But the about 40 fighters survived, and these guerrillas survived, and they formed what became the FARC. And because of the inequality and poverty that plagued the countryside as a result of the economic system, the FARC just grew in numbers and power. And at one point in the late 90s, it threatened to overthrow the government. I mean, they were on the verge of having an armed revolution and taking power. So the U.S. stepped in, basically with what was called Plan Colombia. And so my documentary gets into that history, but it's primarily focused on the 2016 peace accord, how that came to be, and how essentially it functioned as the title of the documentary is, a trap. Because basically you had the Obama administration in power then, and you had the government of Juan Manuel Santos in Colombia, both of whom were kind of charismatic on the liberal side, and they were able to very effectively seduce the FARC into into laying down their weapons after a 10-year campaign to assassinate the FARC leadership and really severely weaken them. That was all basically designed by the U.S. and the CIA gave the Colombian military a huge amount of weaponry and ability to target these top leaders from the FARC. They basically weakened them, convinced them to lay down their weapons, and then what happens is Juan Manuel Santos is out. Ivan Duque, who's a straight up narco and is a pawn of the top narco in basically all of Latin America, Alvaro Uribe, the former president of Colombia. Duque comes in. He's a hard right wing guy, and Trump comes in, and they basically go to war on the peace accord. They do everything they can to undermine the peace accord. And even before Duque came in, you have ex-combatants, basically former FARC fighters who agreed to lay down their weapons and integrate into society. They started being exterminated immediately when the peace accord was signed. And so that's continued on and on to this day through the end of the Obama years, through the Trump years, and through the Biden years. And so, the thesis of the documentary is that yes, the accord functions as a way to basically trap the FARC guerrillas, and then the final part of the documentary shows. I mean, I guess we can just show the trailer. Maybe I'm going on too long, but basically, the final part of the documentary shows a DEA plot to entrap the FARC peace negotiators, the top guerrillas who agreed to lay down, went and did all these negotiations and became a political party, agreed to be peaceful, and then the DEA in cahoots with the Colombian government tried to ensnare them in a phony drug deal. So
wow, I had no idea that the U.S. was so involved in all this. Although it does not surprise me. But yeah, so let's see the trailer here.
Pero una vez firmado y anunciado al mundo, empieza el proceso de exterminio de excombatientes.
Para el Estado es más fácil asesinarnos que cumplirnos.
Ahí mismo es que le dijeron Carlos, entonces el finado lo llamaron, el finado golpeó la cara, ahí mismo le dieron.
Que me metí como hasta las 3 de la mañana estuve allá. Tenemos gente, tenemos amigos.
Hubo un plan meticulosamente diseñado.
Los agentes de la DEA sabían que estaban adelantando operaciones encubiertas.
El gobierno de Iván Duque fue elegido con el apoyo de narcotraficantes.
Si no nos juntamos, nos van a exterminar.
Papá, vámonos de aquí, que está muy peligroso. Tengo miedo.
Va con reclamo.
Looks incredible, man. I'm excited for it.
thank you.
So, have you gone down there a bunch? Was that filming from you, or a stringer, as I say, or?
I went down there in December of 2020, and spent like a week down there, going out to, I spent a couple days in Bogota, in the capital, interviewing political figures and experts. And then I went deep into the coca growing region, an area called Cauca, where there have been more massacres and social leaders killed than anywhere else in the country. So a very heads up place, formerly controlled by the FARC. And when the FARC disbanded or become a political party, then all of a sudden you have all these different interests coming in and trying to take over the territory, because the government was supposed to provide security and help all these farmers transition from growing coca, which to make cocaine, which is the only way they could survive. They were supposed to help them grow fruits and vegetables and regular produce and help them get it to market, but they never did it. They just didn't follow through with that stuff. So people keep growing coca because that's the only thing they can sell to survive. And then you have drug cartels and paramilitaries on the payroll of international corporations, and then a few FARC fighters who decided we're not going to lay down arms, and people going back to picking up their arms again and that kind of thing. So this peace accord, it has had some positive effects, but it's really has not been fulfilled. And the key thing in my mind is just the fact that there have been more than 1,500 social leaders assassinated by shadowy groups that are obviously very clearly linked to the state, and there's no investigation. Nothing comes out of it. It's just like every couple days, sometimes I feel like every day there's a social leader or an ex-combatant or an indigenous leader or an environmental defender or someone assassinated. And it's incredible because it doesn't make the news at all in the US. I mean, there's just nothing about it.
Colombia is one of the countries where indigenous and environmental leaders are executed the most, assassinated the most. I remember I had on an Afro-Colombian, and several members of her family had been killed, basically for just trying to defend the environment.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. It's shocking. I mean, just when you just look at how blatant it is, and who the people are being murdered, not only now, I mean, it's actually technically it's less violent statistically than it was, 10 years ago. It's just a recomposition of violence. But I mean, during the Plan Colombia years in particular, basically from, 2000 to 2010, I mean, it's just extraordinarily violent. So, but that it just still goes on today, and there's no media coverage. And all you hear, of course, in media is about Venezuela. They just project what's happening in Colombia onto Venezuela because Colombia.
I remember they always try and accuse Venezuela of being a narco state. And there was a map, I think it's several years old now. I'm sure it's not much different, but it came out from like our DEA or something. Like it was our own map showing like threads of drug trafficking, and they were all coming from Colombia and a lot from Mexico. And then there was like one little thread from Venezuela, and yet our government is like, they're a narco state.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like every year Colombia sets a new record for like most cocaine, coca grown and cocaine manufactured. And we're just like, great job, guys. You're really doing a lot. So, I mean, it's so obvious when you get down there. If you just start to examine the Colombian media, because all these assassinations and all this stuff is reported in Colombian media. It just doesn't make it into English language media hardly at all. There's not really anyone reporting on it. So, I'm trying to, with this documentary, just kind of pull the curtain back and just show what is happening in Colombia just straight up as a result of U.S. empire. All of this, like the Colombian military is completely structured on basically guidance from the U.S. The paramilitaries are a project of the U.S. going back to the 60s. And I mean, these are like genocidal, ISIS-like paramilitaries that are, they'll behead an entire family and leave the heads like on dinner table, on, dinner plates, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's all projects of the U.S. training them. And, Colombia plays, it's not only about what's happening in Colombia, but the region. Colombia is the most important country for the United States for controlling the region, the Caribbean and Latin America. So it, it plays a huge role, and it doesn't get enough attention in my mind in kind of
Yeah.
anti-imperialist media.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that that documentary can be completed. But, folks, it can only be completed with your help. And that's where you come in, folks. I'm not very good at telethons, but I hope you'll join the campaign over at Indiegogo. The link is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. It's also been put in the chat. Also, if you go to Indiegogo, you can just search for Behind the Headlines. Should be the first one that comes up. And if you've already joined the campaign, please throw a comment in the comment stream over here and let people know that you've already joined the campaign. You're already part of supporting Dan's incredible documentaries and the amazing comedy of a young comedian named Lee Camp. I don't know. I've heard some good things about him.
No, I mean, I'll say this, like, I've been watching Lee for years before I knew him. Before I was in journalism, I was watching Lee. And, I had the privilege of working next to you at RT America and just kind of, watching that whole process and being a guest on the show from time to time. And it was awesome. And there's really, no one doing what Lee does. I mean, the comedy world, you can talk about it, Lee, but it's, if you want to, there's no opportunities for dissident comedians. And very few probably, have the critical takes, and analysis that Lee does. So, I'm really excited in that way. And, as far as donating money, nobody likes to ask for money, but the reality is we don't have billionaire benefactors. We don't have.
Right. It's independent. Yeah.
Yeah. We're not The Intercept. And I'm proud to say that because, The Intercept does a lot of dirty work for the empire. And there's a lot of stuff that they cannot and will not touch and I'm not just talking about The Intercept, but, when you start taking money from big interests like that, well, that completely changes. That changes who you are and what you can talk about. And, if you start to bite the hand that feeds you, you're going to be cut off real quick. And so that's why we want to be, funded by a lot of individuals instead of one. So, every little bit that people can give really helps out a lot, and it means a lot to us. So we can continue to do this work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of a key point that I gloss over, is that this is completely, viewer funded. It's completely independent. There are no billionaires making sure that Min Press and Behind the Headlines are able to do everything they want to. So it really does come down to people supporting it through these campaigns. I wanted to get to, let's see, well, I have a couple of topics, but I want to get to, and thanks to everybody who's already said that they already support the campaign. That's fucking awesome. But yeah, let's get to your other documentary. And then I also have some questions about other world events going on. But this one is a trailer for what's going on in Haiti, Another Vision, it's titled. And yeah, there's been a lot of craziness in Haiti that in the rare moments U.S. media covers it at all, you get like a little glimpse. You just get prime minister assassinated and like, that was it, So yeah, tell us what we need to know to watch the trailer.
Well, I'll keep it shorter than the Colombia one, because with Colombia, I kind of forgot we were going to watch the trailer, but I just started talking. But with Haiti, so what happened is when the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moise, was assassinated last summer, I interviewed Kim Ives, the great journalist who's a top expert on Haiti, and he basically, his analysis was that this ties back to this kind of revolutionary movement in formation, led by this guy named Barbecue. His nickname is Barbecue. Real name is Jimmy Cherizier. And so I was like, well, Kim.
But that's a solid nickname. Really is.
Oh, it's a great nickname. Yeah. So I asked Kim, well, can we go interview this guy? You know, afterwards, can we go interview this guy? And Kim was like, yeah, sure. So I just started researching and you know, if you look up anything about barbecue on, you know, if you Google barbecue, it's all negative. He's a mass murderer, he's a killer, he's, you know, done every horrible thing you can imagine. And, you know, as
Whereas you Google Obama or Bush or something, for some reason it doesn't just immediately say mass murderer, killer.
Right, right, exactly. I have no idea why. Impossible to deduce. But
Yeah.
so yeah, exactly. That's already like, wait, if they're calling him a killer, it's a good indication that like he's probably not. But of course, you know, we have to deal with evidence, not suspicion. So the documentary, we examine all of the claims against Cherizier. We leave no stone unturned, and a good portion of it is dedicated to actually just debunking propaganda. And then we also, you know, go to his areas in Haiti, the area in Haiti in Port-au-Prince, in the capital, the slum that he, I don't want to, that he resides in and has this kind of popular movement. And you know, I really didn't know what to think going in, but you know, let's show the trailer and then maybe we can continue.
Yeah, we can keep going. All right, 1 second here.
A nation in turmoil, ravaged by empire, neighborhoods at war, the state on the brink of collapse, revolution in the air. A man at the center of it all. To some, a villain.
Jimmy Cherizier alias Barbecue, li te vle guider nous non façon pour nous voler même javel.
He's a criminal. He's not revolutionary.
To others, a hero.
He is a revolutionary leader.
C'est grâce à déporter avec Monsieur Barbecue qu'a fait vivre.
Join us as we seek to uncover the truth about the uprising in Haiti today.
Attention, watch out, come here.
They have to have a revolution. It's got to happen.
So, why is it so important for our you know, our media outlets and everything to make him out to be so villainous?
Basically because the project that Cherizier is undertaking would fundamentally change Haiti from a neo-colony where there's essentially slavery. You know, we get cheap products manufactured in Haiti and people live in slums, except for a tiny elite, which, you know, lord over them as kind of subcontractors for U.S. empire. And it's just cheap labor. And we can just exploit the hell out of Haiti, which is basically what it's been since it was colonized, and so now it's kind of neo-colonization, and especially I think
and Haiti is one of the only countries, or maybe the only country, that got its freedom from a slave rebellion, and the U.S. has ever since that day, whatever hundreds of years ago was. Ever since that day, we viewed them as, the threat of the good example, the threat of. For a while, it was slaves standing up, but now it's just any kind of revolution against the ruling elite. And one of my favorite historical facts about Haiti is they ended up having to pay France for their freedom. They had to pay restitution to France for being freed from France.
Right, exactly. I mean, the injustice that Haiti has suffered is just, goes on to the say, and it's incredible if you just look at the history. But essentially what Cherizier is doing, and we try to take a kind of, as you saw in the trailer, it raises the question of what is this guy, and we show his critics, who say that he's a criminal and a killer and all this stuff, and then we show his supporters. And just for that, I was attacked online a lot by just for asking the question, well, is this guy a killer, as the State Department says, or is he actually some kind of revolutionary? Even if he's not fully formed, does he have revolutionary potential or this kind of thing? And what I found, not knowing, going in, is that indeed he does represent a real threat to U.S. empire, and that's why there's so much propaganda against him. If you go around Port-au-Prince in general, it's really grim. I mean, there's just poverty everywhere. You see insecurity in people's eyes, looking back and forth, like people are just in bad shape. If you go into Cherizier's neighborhood, it feels actually like you're in Cuba. Like as soon as you go into kind of the go onto his street and you go past the barricade that his guys control, I mean, it's just totally different. The streets are clean. They're totally clean. They have people can get food. People are hanging out. It's not like I mean, there's still poverty, obviously, but it reminded me a lot of Cuba, just in the sense that you go around Cuba and it's like, okay, plenty of things are decrepit in the neighborhoods and old, but they're not, in this kind of total state of horror where it's just like the most unrestrained capitalism exploiting people in the worst way. And so that's
no, most people, I have been to Cuba. I haven't been to Haiti, but I have been to Cuba, and most people seem fairly happy. They don't seem wealthy, but they seem fairly happy.
Right, exactly. And so that there's this kind of kernel of that Cherizier has created in this little enclave in Port-au-Prince in his neighborhood by becoming a popular leader. And he's managed to unite, originally 9, but 9, so-called gangs. I hope everyone sees my air quotes. It's gangs, meaning, it's obviously a derogatory term, but I mean, basically self-defense groups. When there's no real state power, you have like strong men emerge. Some of them get into criminal activity. Some of them don't. Some of them reject it out of principle. And Cherizier basically rejects it. And so his message is essentially, well, look, if we're going to get out of this situation, we all have to unite. All of us people with guns have to unite and have an armed revolution. And maybe that's not pretty, but that's essentially his message. And so basically you have the oligarchs of the island, who, many of whom have U.S. citizenship, are tied to U.S., Canadian, and French interests, who are fueling these neighborhoods fighting each other. And Cherizier's whole thing is, no, instead of fighting each other, we have to unite and essentially turn it on them. And so that's why he's constantly demonized.
Does this have anything to do or any intersection with the assassination of the prime minister?
Yeah, so it's still unknown who who ordered the assassination of Jovenel Moise, but Kim Ives is a real Haiti expert. His thesis, when I interviewed him, which still seems to hold up, is that basically the oligarchy that hates Cherizier had Jovenel Moise assassinated because he was kind of a weak, embattled president, was facing all these protests, and basically when Moise was elected, he was brought in by Martelly, who was the former president and just was the most powerful political figure, a total gangster. Moise basically had his own ideas and wanted to do some things for his legacy, have some infrastructure built, improve the country a little bit. He, in in order to do that, he went to these oligarchs who funded him and said, I need money to do this. And they said, no, you work for us. We don't work for you. And so not long after,
we don't care about your legacy, and we're not going to spend money for it.
yeah, exactly. Like, what do you got this whole thing wrong, pal? So all of a sudden he's assassinated. And so Kim's hypothesis was that the same bourgeoisie that want to get rid of Cherizier also basically got rid of Jovenel Moïse, had Jovenel Moïse assassinated by a bunch of Colombian mercenaries, actually, in order to basically bring in a strongman type figure, someone stronger who would be able to like put down this brewing revolution in the slums. And so I think that it seems like that still holds up, though, it's still, there's no smoking gun evidence of who actually ordered that assassination. There still kind of continues to unfold, and then, and there's allegations made, and there's some stuff that came out recently. But, it's still an ongoing investigation. But if you look at the political climate, I think it's pretty clear. Like, who would have tens of, millions and millions of dollars to have the president assassinated? It's got to be some pretty rich people, and there's not a whole lot of really rich people, especially who hated the president.
Yeah. Well, again, that documentary looks incredible. And folks, if you want to see these documentaries get finished and the funding that's needed in order to get all of the editing done and everything like that, please become part of the campaign at Indiegogo. The link is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Also, you can just go to Indiegogo and do a search for Behind the Headlines, and we should be the first one that comes up. Like I said earlier, I also will be starting a new show. It will not be identical to Redacted Tonight, because nothing ever will be, but it will be kind of like the first half of Redacted Tonight. It'll be the same writing, passion, topics, all of that stuff. Lucky for me, I do all my own writing, so I don't have to find a new team of writers to handle the load. But yeah, if you want to see that show, that it's going to be called The Most Censored News with Lee Camp, and that will start as well if this campaign is successful. So head over to Indiegogo and check it out. Anybody who, if you are already part of the campaign, please throw a comment in the thread, and I'll highlight it. And no, KGB Arthur, I'm not going to name it Redacted tomorrow. That is not happening. But I will say that KGB Arthur is the best name I've ever seen online. So
I didn't even see that. That's funny.
So yeah, please help join the campaign. So I want to go through at least one or two more topics with you while we have the time. You and I've done a lot of videos on Ukraine. It obviously is an incredibly important topic. And it's funny, you and I, if you study this stuff, you can know the real reasons without having to do much research, that the real reason some of this shit is going on. That Russia didn't just, that Putin and Russia didn't just wake up one day and go, I feel like I'll just, invade a country. There's got to be some more shit going on. And of course, you've been covering it for years and years, but, and we don't need to go through all the details, but the funding and arming of the Nazis, which you've covered extensively. And, the U.S. doesn't even do it that quietly, considering, you have photos of McCain standing with them. You have the Congress voting to remove the ban on funding neo-Nazis in whatever, 2013, 2014, whenever they did it. But this came out just the other day, which I like when you get to say, see, we told you so. That's always a fun moment, even though sometimes it takes a year or two to actually get the admission. But in this case, it just took a month or two. So this is from Common Dreams, but they're covering a statement by the U.S. Secretary of Defense is admitting that the real strategic goal in Ukraine is to quagmire Russia. And he was asked how the America views success. What are the goals for success? And he added to, we want to see Ukrainian sovereignty, all the stuff you expect him to say. He then said, we want to see Russia weakened. So that's essentially it right there. That says he's saying it's a proxy war, correct?
Yeah, that's definitely the goal. is to just bleed Russia as much as possible. And so in order to do that, the US is basically just said, well, we're just going to arm whoever is willing to fight Russia. And who's willing to fight Russia is the people who hate Russians the most, which are Nazis. And so, yeah, I mean, suddenly it's considered Russian propaganda to point out that there are a bunch of Nazis in Ukraine, but it's true. And, you can, I mean, it, it's just, it's incredible. I don't know. To me, it's just we're in such an incredible moment, this kind of phase of this psyop where people are just basically celebrating Nazis. There was that Azov chant, that demonstration in Lower Manhattan a couple of days ago on Saturday, where people are just chanting Azov, Azov, which is a straight up neo-Nazi battalion integrated into the National Guard in Ukraine that is trained, armed, and funded by the United States. And
some of them legit have swastikas on their outfits, but all of them have the modified swastika, their new logo they have, but it's still it's swastika, adjacent.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no getting around it. They are straight up Nazis, in every sense of the word. And, the fact that, I don't know. I mean, I remember a few years ago during the Trump era when, around like Charlottesville and all that stuff, it was like the big thing was punching Nazis. And now like that stuff is gone. It's weird. Nobody is like wants to punch Nazis anymore. Now everyone wants Nazis to punch Russia.
Well, and the big mainstream media push or discussion was Trump likes or is supporting Nazis, which in many ways he was. But now the mainstream media is propping up Nazis. PBS PBS did the interview with the mayor of that Ukrainian town with Stefan Bandera, the
Right.
Stefan Bandera portrait behind him slightly blurred out.
Right.
So, a well-known Nazi sympathizer.
Right. So it's like obviously they know who it is. It's not like they just made a mistake, like, oh, that's who that guy is. It's like they knew ahead of time. Let's just blur that out, and no one will know, because that's it. And no one will know we're supporting Nazis if we just cover up that portrait in the back. So yeah, I mean, the U.S. just wants permanent war to bleed Ukraine to bleed Russia, and just use Ukraine as a battering ram and fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. And it's extremely dangerous because there's constant, escalation. There's pressure on Biden from the neocons and real ideologues in the State Department who have little attachment or maybe no attachment to reality, that this, proxy war could easily escalate into direct conflict. I mean, if you watch mainstream media, there's constant talk about, we need to send more weapons and better weapons and bigger weapons.
And the press conferences, the press corps is like begging the, Biden and the press secretary, please, have a no-fly zone, which is basically nuclear war,
Right.
shoot down Russian jets. Like, it's amazing to watch them beg for their own nuclear annihilation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. We're supposed to think that like if we just if we just take out Russian warplanes, they won't react. They won't retaliate. That could so easily escalate, as planners in the Pentagon well know, that will quickly escalate to possible nuclear war. And so, which is, does that stay in Ukraine or Europe, or, are we, is Washington, D.C., does that turn into a mushroom cloud too? But basically, the absolute worst thing possible. So that's what the U.S. is trying to do, and is basically just risking all of this stuff in order to, punish Russia, because it wants, total global domination, because the U.S. wants total global domination with no competitors, and cannot accept the reality that there are other countries with similar power that have the right to exist, just like the U.S. does. So
Yeah, yeah. The U.S. For a long time has had a good measure of hegemony, global hegemony, and the U.S. empire is fading. We're in late stage capitalism. Most of the resources have been extracted. We got to this place of one of the richest countries in the world by extracting and destroying other cultures. You just were talking about Haiti, for example, and now our ruling elite, these sociopaths at the top, are incredibly worried about cooperation between nations. They're incredibly worried about Russia and China working together with certain EU countries, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and various economics that were aligning. So we were seeing cooperation between countries, which, countries that are cooperating economically tend to not go to war with each other, and they tend to try and be helpful to each other. But we don't want that because that's bad for us. So we're creating this at the very least economic world war. Let's hope not a hot world war, but we're creating this economic, dividing of the world, a new kind of Iron Curtain, and it's among many things, it's turning the EU back, into feudal states under the dollar, and it's cutting off connections and cooperation with Russia, and we're trying to drive a wedge between Russia and China, and of course we need to be working together as countries to solve the globe's problems.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a crazy geopolitical reconfiguration going on right now with basically the West cutting off Russia, and it's not. It's not previous years. Actually, I mean, Russia has been preparing for this for several years, since 2014, since the Maidan coup, because they essentially knew this moment was coming. So all the sanctions that the U.S. has leveled against Russia, the economic pullout, all of the corporations pulling out, they thought it was going to destroy the Russian economy. And the Russian ruble, took a nosedive at first, but now it's recovered to its, position before everything kicked off.
And it's actually, this will circle back to censorship. It's exactly what Scott Ritter said would happen. I know you talked to him as well. I had him on in the early days, right after right after RT America was deleted. I had him on my live stream, and he said, Russia hasn't played their oil card yet. And when they do, Europe is screwed royally. And the economic ripple effects are going to be massive. And sure enough, I mean, it was weeks later, but sure enough, here we are. Russia's playing their oil card, and it's not pretty, and it's not going to be pretty for Europe.
Yeah. Now, so yesterday, well, a couple of weeks ago, Russia said that it wants to be paid for natural gas for its energy supplies to Europe in rubles. And basically, the EU said, no, we don't want to do that. And so it's, well, okay, get your gas somewhere else. And they don't have another supply. Europe is, look, for the well-being of the average European, Europe has to be integrated with Russia. I mean, it can't, otherwise it just has to pay for far more expensive American natural gas that's shipped that's shipped overseas. And so now, yesterday, Bulgaria is, they announced.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I don't like to use euphemism natural gas, so I just call it planetary death fluid. So I hope you don't mind.
Okay, all right, yeah, there we go. So, Bulgaria and Poland are now going to be cut off from Russian.
Yeah, they just cut off their oil. Yeah,
and so then, this is incredible to me. I tweeted it out. I don't know if you can pull up the tweet, but the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, Kirill Petkov is his name. He encouraged his citizens, as the gas is being cut off, and Bulgaria is the poorest country in the EU. He told his citizens, and this guy's trained at Harvard, to take their salary and donate it to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense so they can buy more weapons. That's what he told them to do. So, I mean, it's hard.
I have it here in 1 second. Is that it?
Yeah. So this guy, and he puts up like a bank account for the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. It's just incredible the level of stupidity that these European leaders are displaying in their, total obedience to the U.S. and in going against their own interests I mean, it's just, yeah, it's total suicide from Europe.
Donate it to the Ministry of Defense. I mean, and I love you if you go on Amazon, it's like as a banner at the top, donate to Ukraine.
Right.
And I'm like, I wonder where that money's going. Funneled through Amazon and the US Defense Department. Where does that money end up?
Yeah, exactly. Every social media, like I used Airbnb like 2 weeks ago. I was in California and went to Joshua Tree National Park, and like, Airbnb is like help Ukraine. If you like log into Google, everything help Ukraine. LinkedIn, I had to look at a LinkedIn profile and it was like get the latest updates from Ukraine. Everything's, it's just this incredible psyop, and it's like
Airbnb, the business that has apparently spent millions trying to cover up that they have a rape problem.
yeah.
They care about the Ukrainians.
Right. Yes, exactly. How's Airbnb? What have they had to say about Yemen lately? The worst.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, actually, what I tweeted the other day was because Israel was bombing Damascus yesterday, maybe. And I tweeted, so I guess this means every American liberal is going to change their thumbnail to the Syrian flag, and all Israeli athletes are going to be banned from competition, correct?
Right. Yeah, it's like when I go, into like downtown DC or any of the like kind of wealthier neighborhoods, or even, just the kind of the drone boxes where all the like people who work in the in government and all the NGOs around Capitol Hill where they all live, it's just Ukrainian flags everywhere. And then if you go into like the poorer neighborhoods of DC, there's none. It's just obviously such a class thing where it's this like, basically people showing their obedience to propaganda by like having the flag out there or putting it in their profile, or like, just being so worried about Ukraine, which like obviously war is hell, but nobody cared about, nobody in the US.
I'm opposed to the Russian invasion like I'm opposed to all war, but acting like it just started yesterday and there's no lead up, and that the U.S. didn't help create this proxy war, and that the U.S. is not trying to create peace at all, and in fact pressuring Zelensky and Ukraine to not actually end this thing. You need to understand that, or you're a goddamn child who is, doesn't want to actually think about the reality of the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's just this. I mean, this war has been going on since 2014 as a result of the U.S. coup. The U.S. orchestrated coup in Ukraine that, in which the coup regime immediately launched a war on the republic. So in the basically two statelets broke away because they saw a bunch of Nazis coming to power who want to kill Russians, and these majority Russian areas were like, wait a minute, we're gonna get slaughtered. And so, these Nazis come to power and say, we want Ukraine without Russians. And so, that's when the war started.
Dan, someone asked this earlier. Sorry, I don't have it handy, but if you want to answer this real quick, and then we'll wrap up in a few minutes. But Zelensky's Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think they call a Jew who, there's like a term for Jews who collaborate with Nazis,
I mean, capos,
capo. I mean,
Capo?
it was not kindly looked upon in World War II. The fact is, Zelensky is, yes, he is Jewish. There's a really good piece in the Gray Zone about his about how Zelensky made peace with Nazis. He never emphasized his Jewish identity prior to where it became useful, just recently. And he, was just a comedian, and basically had nothing to do with Judaism. And all of a sudden it's useful.
Yeah. And on top of that, he was put into that position by a billionaire. I forget the guy's name. If you
Igor Kolomoisky.
Yeah. And that guy funded and helped create the TV show that made him a star playing the president of Ukraine, and then aired that TV show on his networks that were very prevalent in Ukraine. So basically made this guy even more famous as the president of Ukraine, then funded his campaign to run for the real presidency of Ukraine. So it's like, I mean, this guy's been a puppet all along. Like,
yeah, exactly. He has no power. He also has, no, he's not brave at all. I mean, he's just basically leading his people to get killed. To have permanent war. He's basically happy to be the battering ram for the U.S. And at some point, I mean, this is Scott Ritter's prediction. He's going to do what Ashraf Ghani did and just catch a plane to Miami and get paid off. And he's done his dirty work, and that's it. So, I mean, Zelensky is basically just a pretty face. He's lipstick on a pig.
And even if you wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, again, Scott Ritter's point was that the Nazis may not be huge in number in the Ukraine military. I mean, it's tough to know the exact number, but they're the most violent, and that gives them huge control. So multiple Ukrainian leaders or diplomats have been executed. It's at least 3 or more, or threatened. And 3 have been executed for basically saying they should sit down with Russia. So if you wanted to give Zelensky every benefit of the doubt in the world, the least you could say is, well, he's afraid if he actually sits down with Russia, he'll be killed, and therefore there's no peace. There's no serious peace talks going on, and the U.S. wants that. The U.S. is fine with it. These are the people we're funding and arming.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's plenty of evidence of Nazis actually threatening Zelensky's life. So, I mean, you can imagine if you're a bunch of Nazis who basically, Yevon Karas, who's the leader of the C-14 Nazi gang that has contracts with the state to do patrols, he said that we have a state within a state in Ukraine. So while it's not every it's not an actual, Sig Heiling Nazi state in the same way that, like Nazi Germany was. But they just basically have taken over the structure of the state. There's an article in actually Radio Free Europe, the CIA propaganda outlet from a couple of years ago, that I found really fascinating, where there was an episode in like 2017, 2018, where a cop was breaking up a Nazi rally, and the cop threw a Nazi to the ground and said, "Stay down, Banderite." Banderite is a reference to Stepan Bandera, the Nazi collaborator, who's basically now a hero for the Nazis and basically nationalists in Ukraine. And what happened was there was a huge amount of outrage against the cop who said that. He was punished, I think forced to resign. And there was a hashtag campaign in which, originating from the Ministry of Interior, and all of the police officials in the country were all tweeting and putting on Facebook in Ukrainian, hashtag I am Banderite. So they're all just saying openly, I'm a Nazi. No, we're all Nazis. They're all saying it explicitly.
Tripping over themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, maybe like not every single person who's fighting in the Ukrainian military is a Nazi for sure. There are people who've been conscripted, I'm sure, who definitely against their own will. But to deny that Nazis have basically very serious power and are very violent and willing to kill anyone who dares oppose them is disingenuous, and that's the reality of Ukraine.
So, folks, this is the type of discussion I feel like we need, and it'd be lovely to have it on our mainstream media, but that isn't going to happen anytime soon. So if you want to see Dan's incredible work continue, and you want to see me start a new show, then we need your help. It's an Indiegogo campaign for Behind the Headlines and Mint Press. And you can find it by the link that's scrolling across the bottom of the page. Also, you can just go to Indiegogo.com and search for Behind the Headlines. And, please share this, let people know, join the campaign, be a part of it. And hopefully I can start that new show, and hopefully Dan can finish all these amazing docs, which we only went through 2 of them. I think you have a few more, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us today, and I hope to see a lot more of you. And thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, looking forward to it. So everyone, tell your uncle, your grandma, support our work, and if you can't, we still appreciate the support anyway. But we rely on our viewers. So thank you.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. Keep fighting.